People in Boston still insist that on certain winter mornings, when the air is sharp and the harbor wind carries old scents, you can smell something faintly sweet drifting across Commercial Street. Most newcomers shrug it off as imagination, but the elders shake their heads, whispering that it is the same smell that hung over the city on January 15, 1919, the day the Great Molasses Flood swallowed a neighborhood and left one of the strangest, most unbelievable disasters in American history. Imagine hearing a deep rumble, like the growl of a distant storm. Imagine stepping outside into the cold afternoon and seeing a 40-foot wall of dark, gleaming molasses barreling toward you at the speed of a train. It sounds impossible, like a scene from a strange dream or a satirical cartoon. Yet it happened, and the physics behind it were very real as the people who were swept to their deaths by 2.3 million gallons of industrial syrup. To understand how such a disaster became possible, you must go back to the early 1900s, when Boston, like the rest of America, was a landscape of rapid industrial growth, endless ambition, and almost no safety regulations. At the center of this story stood a massive iron tank owned by the Purity Distilling Company, a subsidiary of the U.S. Industrial Alcohol Company. The tank was located in the bustling North End, near the waterfront, overshadowing a neighborhood filled with Italian immigrants, horse stables, docks, rail lines, tenements, and small factories. The tank was so enormous, 50 feet tall and 90 feet wide, that local children claimed you could see it from anywhere in the neighborhood. Many families remembered it not just for its size, but for the eerie groans it made at night. Whenever it was filled, the metal plates shuddered, letting out a low metallic moan that echoed between buildings. Some said it sounded like the tank was crying. The warnings had been there from the beginning. Workers reported leaks almost immediately after its construction in 1915. Molasses would ooze through the seams, forming sticky brown rivulets. Instead of repairing the structure, the company sent workers to paint the tank brown to hide the leaks. This decision, the kind that can only come from arrogance or greed, would one day be used as damning evidence in court. But back then, few imagined the full consequences that would follow. The tank stored molasses used in industrial alcohol production, much of which was destined for wartime weapons manufacturing. Molasses was far more valuable than one might assume. It was a key ingredient for making ethanol, which in turn was used to produce munitions, fuel, and even early chemical weapon components. With World War I driving demand sky high, the tank was filled again and again to maximum capacity. By early January 1919, the war had ended, but production hadn't fully slowed. Meanwhile, Boston was experiencing an unusual warm spell. Temperatures jumped from frigid cold to nearly 40 degrees Fahrenheit within hours, warm enough to cause the molasses inside the tank to ferment rapidly. Fermentation produced gases. Gases increased pressure, and the tank, already groaning from structural flaws, was turning into a giant ticking bomb. That afternoon, at approximately 12:30 p.m., several witnesses heard sharp popping noises like the crack of gunfire. Horses panicked, workers froze. A transportation clerk named George Leahy later told investigators that the sound reminded him of a machine gun. Seconds later, the tank ruptured. No one could quite describe the first moment with full clarity. Trauma tends to scramble memory. But all accounts agreed on one thing. There was no slow leak, no gradual release. The tank exploded with the force of a small earthquake. Iron plates, some weighing over a ton, shot through the air like shrapnel. A wave of molasses, black and heaving and impossibly large, surged forward. The pressure launched it at nearly 35 miles per hour, faster than a galloping horse. fast enough to tear buildings from their foundations. Imagine being there. Imagine the smell, warm, sugary, thick like burnt caramel. Imagine the sound, a roaring, sloshing tidal wave. Residents described it as a brown wall, an avalanche of death, a living creature. For some, it reached their chest before they could even move. For others, it swept them upward like driftwood. Children walking home for lunch, dock workers, firefighters, horses pulling wagons, even pedestrians simply crossing the street, none of them had time to outrun it. The first building destroyed was the nearby firehouse. The wave hit it with such force that the entire structure collapsed, trapping firefighters under shattered beams and heavy equipment. The only survivor from the first floor, firefighter George Brophy, recalled the moment the wave smashed in. Everything went black. It was like being hit by a freight train made of tar. Outside, chaos unfolded in every direction. People were trapped in the sticky sludge, struggling to move even their arms. Molasses is denser than water. Once it wraps around your legs, it is almost impossible to escape without assistance. Rescuers later compared it to drowning in warm cement. Those who weren't immediately swallowed were caught by the second wave, created as the molasses hit the seawall and rebounded. The returning wave carried debris, splintered wood, shards of iron, pieces of rooftops, wagons, animals, all hurtling back toward the already devastated neighborhood. The force was so powerful that one truck was hurled into the second story of a house. A steel girder was twisted like licorice. Within minutes, the entire North End waterfront looked like a battlefield. But what came next was just as terrifying. When the massive wave finally settled, the neighborhood was covered in molasses as deep as 3 feet in some places. The warm wave quickly cooled in the winter air, turning the syrup into a thick, cold, glue-like substance that made rescue efforts almost impossible. Police officers, sailors from the nearby USS Nantucket, and volunteers rushed to help, but many became trapped themselves. Boots were pulled from feet, clothing stuck to the ground, horses drowned where they stood. Firefighters used saws, axes, and anything they could find to cut people free. Doctors arrived on horseback and on foot, slipping in the sticky ground, trying to reach victims buried beneath the heavy sludge. One officer said he could still hear people crying from underneath collapsed buildings, but couldn't reach them in time. By the end of the day, the death toll was staggering. 21 lives lost, over 150 injured, dozens of horses killed, and an entire neighborhood shattered. The cleanup took weeks. Crews sprayed seawater from fireboats to wash the molasses off streets and buildings. But even then, the sticky brown residue clung to everything. Workers would scrape one layer, only to find another underneath. Molasses seeped into sewers, basements, and even the harbor itself, where it would stain the water brown for months. Some claimed the fish tasted sweeter for a time. Boston newspapers reported that every city surface, from telephones to streetcars, felt tacky for weeks. Residents tracked molasses on their shoes, carrying the disastrous memory far beyond the North End. But perhaps the most astonishing chapter of this story began after the streets were cleaned, the legal battle that followed, one of the longest and most consequential civil cases in American history. The U.S. Industrial Alcohol Company, desperate to avoid blame, argued that the explosion had been caused by anarchists. This wasn't as ridiculous as it sounds now. The early 1900s were filled with political bombings, rising tensions, labor conflicts, and waves of anti-immigrant fear. The company claimed sabotage had planted a bomb inside the tank in revenge for wartime industrial production. But the science and the evidence refused to cooperate with this theory. In the lawsuit that followed, 129 residents filed claims. The court hired an independent auditor named Hugh Ogden to oversee the proceedings. Ogden held hearings that lasted over 3 years, gathering thousands of pages of testimony. Engineers, chemists, and metallurgists were brought in to evaluate the tank. Their findings were damning. The steel used to build the tank was too thin. Rivets were of poor quality. The tank was never properly tested. Engineers had warned the company repeatedly, only to be ignored. One piece of testimony stood out among all others. A local worker said the tank groaned like the devil every time it was filled. Another admitted he had seen children play a game where they dipped cups under the leaking seams to collect molasses. The courtroom gasped when witnesses revealed that the company had painted the tank brown specifically to conceal leaks. Not sabotage, not anarchists, just corporate negligence. In the end, the court ruled in favor of the plaintiffs. The company paid nearly $1 million in damages, equivalent to about $17 million today. More importantly, the case helped establish modern corporate liability laws and building safety standards. Engineers began applying stronger codes to industrial structures, and the era of unregulated megatanks drew to a close. Yet for all the scientific explanations, legal victories, and historical analysis, the Great Molasses Flood still occupies a strange place in American memory. It is both tragic and surreal, horrifying yet almost unbelievable. Perhaps this is why it lingers in the national imagination. It serves as a reminder of the hidden dangers behind everyday industries, the hubris of companies that cut corners, and the unpredictable ways nature and human engineering can collide. But for the survivors, the memories were not abstract. One woman, who was just a young girl at the time, later described how the molasses coated everything she owned, her clothing, her furniture, even her hair, for weeks. Others remembered the strange silence after the waves settled, broken only by the cries of the injured and the groan of collapsing structures. Firefighters carried nightmares for years afterward, recalling people they could hear but couldn't reach. Over a century later, the neighborhood has changed. The tank is gone, replaced by a small recreation area. Children now play where the wave once thundered through. Tourists walk the streets unaware of the history beneath their feet. But if you ask the right locals or wander the streets on a warm, windy day, they'll tell you that sometimes, just sometimes, the air still smells faintly of molasses. Maybe it's an illusion, or maybe disasters leave traces we cannot fully erase. The people of Boston will tell you that memory is sticky, just like molasses. It clings to stories, to streets, to entire generations. And this story, astonishing as it sounds, remains one of the most unforgettable in American history. Because once, on a bright winter afternoon, the city of Boston was swallowed by sweetness. In the end, the court ruled in favor of the plaintiffs. The company paid nearly $1 million in damages, equivalent to about $17 million today. More importantly, the case helped establish modern corporate liability laws and building safety standards. Engineers began applying stronger codes to industrial structures, and the era of unregulated megatanks drew to a close. Yet for all the scientific explanations, legal victories, and historical analysis, the Great Molasses Flood still occupies a strange place in American memory. It is both tragic and surreal, horrifying yet almost unbelievable. Perhaps this is why it lingers in the national imagination. It serves as a reminder of the hidden dangers behind everyday industries, the hubris of companies that cut corners, and the unpredictable ways nature and human engineering can collide. But for the survivors, the memories were not abstract. One woman, who was just a young girl at the time, later described how the molasses coated everything she owned, her clothing, her furniture, even her hair, for weeks. Others remembered the strange silence after the waves settled, broken only by the cries of the injured and the groan of collapsing structures. firefighters carried nightmares for years afterward, recalling people they could hear but couldn't reach. Over a century later, the neighborhood has changed. The tank is gone, replaced by a small recreation area. Children now play where the wave once thundered through. Tourists walk the streets unaware of the history beneath their feet. But if you ask the right locals or wander the streets on a warm, windy day, they'll tell you that sometimes, just sometimes, the air still smells faintly of molasses. Maybe it's an illusion, or maybe disasters leave traces we cannot fully erase. The people of Boston will tell you that memory is sticky, just like molasses. It clings to stories, to streets, to entire generations. And this story, astonishing as it sounds, remains one of the most unforgettable in American history. Because once, on a bright winter afternoon, the city of Boston was swallowed by sweetness.